Hello, thank you for your interest in this paper created for the Value Factory event. I'm Mike Graham and I will now talk about value management for decision makers. I should say, by way of introduction, a few points about value management. There is a European standard, EN 12973, which contains a great deal of useful information and guidance. The standard highlights 4 principles. Organisations should strengthen the value orientation, the culture and the way people deliver value for their employers, for their communities and for themselves. Principle of apply function thinking. People should recognise that change and innovation are part of value improvement. Applying a structured holistic approach is vital, seeing problems in the round. And of course, managing complexity, risk and uncertainty, because the world is a dynamic place. So, returning to our problem situation. When we make decisions, we're normally influenced by all manner of things: external pressures, stakeholder requirements, our personal interests, and unconscious bias. The Value Management Standard makes it very clear that to understand context, applying a structured, holistic approach is essential. Do you see what the camera shows or the whole picture? We also need to recognize and understand bias. Bias in our systems and bias in our ways of thinking. Tools are applied together as a coherent, holistic approach rather than standard, isolated actions. There are many models which can help us understand situations, and in this way help us make balanced, wise decisions in context. This model shown here is the Cynefin model invented by Snowden, some 20 odd years ago within IBM, and I've given you some detailed references in the paper. Even in relatively simple situations where we have a clear defined process, and in theory at least we know exactly what is happening today and will happen tomorrow, complexity is still there, still affecting us, impacting efficiency. Complexity is generated by choices. I will now describe 3 straightforward examples which illustrate how value management enables us to make progress through legitimate decision making, make progress by achieving consensus, and make progress by right first time. Each of those 3 strategies moves the people involved towards agreement and towards certainty, moving from perhaps a complex situation where there's significant ambiguity and uncertainty, to a situation where we have a much better understanding of what's going on. I'll now say a little bit about the first case study. This is a national programme for highways maintenance across England, where great care was made to achieve legitimate decision making. Rather than making changes piecemeal, changes were made at a time when the benefits of national scale could be realised. There were two key points evident in respect of legitimate decision making. Firstly, championing the process of value improvement is a core responsibility of top management. And secondly, regulations should not be treated as hard constraints. This particular matter on regulations, I'll just emphasise. Regulations may have been enacted 20 years ago, but they were based on a wise judgment of the circumstances and technologies that existed 20 years ago. They may not be the best regulations for today. And once this recognition about constraints by regulation was recognised, and once top management encouraged and demonstrated people had freedom to challenge and perhaps update any constraint to reflect today's environment, it was rapidly realised for the whole supply chain that a legitimate decision could be made to change the unchangeable, and thereby create great benefit. The active involvement of top management supported legitimate decision making. All manner of things were changed and adjusted. These photos show an example of road resurfacing, and the teams achieved a 50% improvement to national productivity for road resurfacing. Quite a step change from the 10% which was originally targeted. One really challenging area is to achieve consensus. In the absence of consensus, there will often be a minority or even a large majority of people who consider their needs are not satisfied. Resources are therefore not always used to the best effect for a community. Decisions made through power or ability to pay are not necessarily wise decisions. The structured use of function analysis methods ensures that all needs are identified and that people can build a shared understanding of need and priorities. Over time, this builds a consensus. People recognise the values which govern decisions. I've showed you on this photo here, an example of on-street farmers market type discussions. Over the years, we've also had City Hall discussions, internet dialogue, notes, engaging through representation, dealing with a community of around 80,000 people. Now, one very practical outcome from making sure that all people who had an interest were involved was that decisions could be made to initiate joint working between public bodies to address matters which affect the community, but which lay outside the responsibility of the local authority. Just think of all the people on the street. Some of them work for a bank, some of them work for an IT company, some of them work for a bus company, some are students, some are elderly. Everybody brings with them their life capability and expertise. There are politicians who might be explicitly invited or maybe bumped into as they go about their normal family business. It's quite incredible what can be done by bringing people together to achieve consensus. Over the, I suppose, 5 years or so this work progressed, we very firmly came to the conclusion that value management forms a framework which has the potential to be a standard methodology, if not the standard methodology, for sustainable decision making. The final example which I've got deals with housing maintenance. Quite often the level and nature of work required is very uncertain. Whenever maintenance is carried out, you're opening up things which you haven't seen before. And whenever you're involving contractors, there are new supply chains involved. The work which is actually required may only become apparent after the maintenance starts, and new supply chains always experience a learning curve as people develop their practical communication channels and working arrangements. Now, a simple risk management approach which focuses on probability of deviation and then agreement of a contingency cost budget or time allowance really does little more than build inefficiencies into a programme of work. Contingencies are typically used as people encounter the effects of uncertainty. More is required to optimise performance, and that's what value management is about. A right first time strategy focused on customer satisfaction and other desirable functions is what counts. And again, function analysis methods are necessary to identify those value-adding desirable functions. In this case study, which again spanned quite a number of years, it was initially a 5-year program, which went so well, the work was done in 4 years. So years 6 and 7 got pulled forward into year 5. We found that the focus on right first time doubled production and very significantly increased the overall satisfaction for tenants, many of whom were elderly or had particular needs in the social accommodation. Now, really, I've just given you a very brief overview. I'm happy to discuss further. The key points that I want to emphasize are that value management methods guides managers to make sustainable decisions and at the same time achieve step changes in productivity. And I would recommend the value management standard to everyone. You can see me in the discussion or ask any questions later by following on Twitter. Thank you for your interest.